Elena had worked as a maid at Castle Voss for 3 years. She swept the long marble halls, polished silver until it shone, and carried heavy trays up winding stairs without ever complaining. She was quiet by nature. She kept her eyes low when nobles passed her in the corridors, and she never spoke unless she was spoken to first. Most of the castle staff barely noticed her. To them, she was simply one more pair of hands doing one more small job in a very large home. She had come to the castle at the age of 17, brought in by Queen Miriam herself after being found at an orphanage near the southern border. Nobody explained why the Dowager Queen had taken a personal interest in a nameless orphan girl, and Elena never asked. She had learned long ago that questions rarely brought comfort. It was easier to work hard, stay unseen, and be grateful for a warm bed and regular meals, things she had not always had. The Alpha King, Damian Voss, ruled the northern territories with a firm hand and a colder heart than most people were comfortable admitting. He was strong, respected, and lonely in a way that nobody around him seemed to notice. For 5 years he had waited for the mate bond every wolf was promised by fate. He had met countless unmated women from noble families, hoping his wolf would finally stir to life in recognition. Every single time, there was nothing. No pull, no spark, no whisper of connection. He had begun to accept, quietly and painfully, that perhaps fate had forgotten him. On the night of the founding ball, the castle was filled with music, laughter, and the soft golden light of 100 candles. Nobles from every allied pack had gathered to celebrate the anniversary of the kingdom's founding. Damian stood near the edge of the ballroom, half listening to a council member discuss trade routes, his mind elsewhere, when a young woman carrying a tray of wine glasses turned a corner too quickly and collided with him. The tray tipped. Wine spilled down the front of his ceremonial coat. The woman gasped and immediately dropped to her knees, apologizing so quickly her words tumbled over each other. She was certain she would be punished. Maids had lost their positions for far smaller mistakes. But Damian did not hear her apology. He did not even notice the wine soaking into his coat. The moment his eyes met hers, something inside him roared to life, a feeling so powerful it nearly knocked the breath out of him. His wolf, silent for 5 long years, surged forward with a single, undeniable certainty. Mate. He knew her name before she gave it, the knowledge rising up from somewhere deep and ancient inside him. Elena. He said it aloud, and the ballroom around them went quiet. Nobles turned to stare. Whispers spread like fire through dry grass. The Alpha King, kneeling in front of a serving girl, calling her his mate. Elena stared up at him in confusion and fear, certain this was some kind of joke or misunderstanding. She was a maid. She scrubbed floors. She was nobody, and everybody in that room knew it. Yet the look in his eyes told her he was not joking. He looked as stunned as she felt, and beneath the stun there was something warmer, something that looked almost like relief. Damian rose to his feet and helped her up as well, ignoring the murmurs around them. He turned to face the crowded ballroom and declared, in a voice that left no room for argument, that Elena was his fated mate, and that anyone who had a problem with that could bring their concerns directly to him. Nobody dared to speak. Nobody except, in the days that followed, Queen Miriam. At first, Damian assumed his mother's discomfort was simple pride. She had always hoped he would marry someone from a respected family, someone who could strengthen alliances between packs. A former orphan working as a maid was not what she had imagined for her son. But as the days passed, Damian noticed something stranger than disapproval in his mother's behavior. She avoided being alone in a room with Elena. Her hands trembled slightly whenever Elena walked past. Once, when she thought no one was watching, Damian caught her staring at Elena with an expression that was not disdain at all. It looked like guilt. He began to ask questions, gently at first, then more firmly. His mother deflected every time, insisting she only worried about the kingdom's stability, about what other packs would think, about tradition. But Damian had grown up watching his mother navigate difficult conversations with practiced grace. He knew the difference between her polished excuses and the truth. This was not politics. This was something personal, something she had buried for a very long time. Finally, one evening, he asked her directly, sitting across from her in her private study with the fire crackling low between them. He told her he would not leave until she told him the truth. Queen Miriam's composure finally broke. 17 years earlier, she explained, a rival Pax Alpha had come to Castle Voss under the pretense of peace. At the time, an old prophecy had begun circulating through the wolf kingdoms, one that spoke of a child who would one day unite the fractured territories through the bond of fated mates. Nobody knew exactly which child the prophecy referred to, but rumors had spread that a girl born in the northern lands that same season carried the mark of it. The rival Alpha had come with the intention of finding that child and either controlling her future or ending it before the prophecy could ever come true. Miriam, only a young queen herself at the time, with a newborn son sleeping in the nursery down the hall, had discovered a baby girl smuggled into the castle grounds by a desperate traveler seeking refuge, a baby who bore the very mark the prophecy described. Rather than let the rival Alpha find her, Miriam made an impossible choice in the middle of that dangerous night. She hid the infant among the servants' quarters, quietly arranged for her birth records to disappear, and let the world believe the marked child had died in the chaos of that visit. It was the only way she could think to keep the baby safe from Pax, who would either use her as a weapon or destroy her to prevent the prophecy from ever unfolding. She had never expected to see that same girl again, let alone watch her grow up in the very castle she had been hidden in, or watch her own son fall in love with her without either of them ever knowing the truth. To keep Elena hidden completely, Miriam had also asked an old pack healer to place a quiet charm over the girl, one that muted the natural signs of the mate bond, the scent recognition, the subtle pull most wolves would notice at official gatherings. It was meant to protect Elena from being discovered too soon by anyone searching for the marked child. Over the years, the charm had slowly faded, which was why the bond between Damien and Elena had stayed silent for so long, only to awaken with such sudden and overwhelming force the night of the ball. Damien sat in stunned silence as his mother finished speaking, tears finally slipping down her face. He was not angry that she had protected an innocent child. He understood the danger she had been trying to prevent. What angered him deeply was the years Elena had spent believing herself completely alone in the world, growing up as an orphan with no family, no history, and no answers, when the truth had been living quietly inside these very walls the whole time. When Elena was told the truth, gently, by Damien himself, she did not feel the anger she expected to feel. Instead, she felt something closer to a strange, aching relief. For years she had wondered why she felt like a ghost, drifting through her own life, why no one had ever come looking for a family that once belonged to her. Now she finally understood. She had not been abandoned. She had been hidden, carefully and desperately, so that she could survive. She sat with Damien long into the night, asking questions about the mother she never knew, about the prophecy she had never asked to be part of, about the years of her own life that suddenly made a strange kind of sense. Damien stayed beside her through every question, holding her hand, letting her feel whatever she needed to feel, without rushing her toward forgiveness or acceptance. News of the revelation did not stay contained within the castle for long. Word spread quickly through allied territories that the long-lost marked child was not only alive, but mated to the Alpha King himself. The rival pack, upon hearing this, saw an opportunity to challenge the legitimacy of the union, sending envoys to question Elena's identity and stir uncertainty among the Northern Territories' allies. They argued that a girl raised as a servant, with no proof beyond an old healer's word and a queen's confession, had no right to stand beside a king. Damien responded the only way he knew how. He called together his full council and the visiting envoys in the grand hall, with Elena standing calmly at his side. He reminded them all that the mate bond was not something that could be faked, forced, or denied. His wolf had recognized her the instant they touched, exactly as fate intended, regardless of what title she once held or what work her hands had once done. He made it clear that any pack seeking to challenge her place beside him would be challenging him directly, and he would not back down from that fight. The envoys left without the answers they had hoped for, and the whispers of doubt slowly faded as the weeks passed. Elena, for her part, found unexpected strength in standing beside Damien during those tense meetings. She was no longer the quiet maid who kept her eyes low in the hallways. She was learning, slowly, to speak with confidence, to ask questions of council members, to understand the responsibilities that would one day be hers as Luna of the Northern Territories. Queen Miriam, meanwhile, struggled with the weight of her long-kept secret even after it had been spoken aloud. One quiet afternoon, she found Elena alone in the garden and knelt before her, an act almost unheard of for a queen. She asked for forgiveness, not as the ruler who had once made a desperate decision to save a stranger's child, but simply as a woman who had held Elena as a newborn and chosen, imperfectly and fearfully, to keep her alive. Elena helped her rise and told her, honestly, that she needed time before she could fully understand everything that had happened. But she also told her that she was grateful, more grateful than words could properly express, for the sacrifice Miriam had made all those years ago. Forgiveness did not arrive all at once, but it began to grow quietly between them in the weeks that followed, built through small conversations, shared meals, and the gentle patience only time could offer. As autumn turned to winter, the castle prepared for a ceremony that would have seemed impossible only months earlier. Elena stood in the great hall, dressed not in a maid's simple uniform, but in robes of deep blue and silver, ready to be formally recognized as Luna of the Northern Territories. Damien stood beside her, his eyes never leaving her face, filled with a pride that had nothing to do with politics or prophecy, and everything to do with the woman who had somehow found her way into his heart, despite years of hidden truths standing between them. The prophecy that had once been feared as a dangerous weapon slowly became something else entirely in the months that followed, something Miriam had quietly hoped for since the night she first hid a frightened infant among the servants of her castle. It was no longer whispered about as a threat to be controlled or eliminated. It became, instead, a quiet promise that unity between fractured territories could come not through force or fear, but through genuine love, patience, and the simple courage to protect something precious, even when the cost felt impossible to bear. Elena often thought back to her years scrubbing the marble floors of Castle Voss, to the quiet loneliness she had carried without understanding why. She no longer saw those years as wasted or empty. They had shaped her into someone patient, humble, and strong, someone who understood both hardship and grace in equal measure. She carried those lessons with her into her new role, determined to lead not with distance or pride, but with the same quiet kindness she had once shown to every person she served. In those first months after the ceremony, Elena spent many quiet mornings walking through the halls she once cleaned, seeing them now with entirely different eyes. She would pause sometimes near the servants' stairwell, where she used to carry heavy trays before dawn, remembering the ache in her arms and the tiredness that used to settle into her bones by nightfall. She never wished those years away. Instead, she visited the kitchens often, sat with the staff during their breaks, and listened to their concerns the way no one had ever listened to hers when she wore their same uniform. The other servants, who once barely noticed her, grew to trust her deeply, not because she commanded respect through her new title, but because she had earned it through years of standing exactly where they stood. Damien noticed this quality in her more and more as the months passed, and it only deepened his admiration. Council meetings that once felt cold and distant to him began to include her perspective on matters he had never considered, questions about how new taxes might affect the lowest-paid workers in the territory, concerns about whether trade agreements accounted for the safety of messengers traveling through dangerous mountain roads. She asked questions born from experience rather than theory, and slowly the council began to value her voice as much as his. Queen Miriam, watching her son and his mate grow closer with each passing season, felt the guilt she had carried for 17 years begin to soften into something gentler. She could never fully erase what she had taken from Elena, the childhood spent without a name, without a family, without answers, but she could spend the years she had left helping to give Elena everything else, patience, honesty, and a place in a family that had, however imperfectly, been protecting her all along. One evening, As winter's first snow began to fall softly over the castle grounds, Elena stood at her window and watched the flakes settle over the gardens below. She thought of the frightened infant smuggled through those same gates 17 years ago, carried by a stranger into danger and uncertainty, saved by a young queen's desperate courage. She thought of the lonely girl who grew up believing she belonged to no one, and of the woman she had become, standing now at the center of a family and a kingdom she never could have imagined for herself. She thought, too, of Damien, and of the wolf inside him that had recognized her before either of them understood what that recognition truly meant. Fate had taken its time reaching them, delayed by fear and old dangers neither of them had chosen, but it had arrived all the same, patient and certain, exactly when they needed it most. And every evening, as the castle settled into quiet and the candles burned low, Damien would find her in the garden where his mother had once knelt before her, and he would simply sit beside her, grateful beyond words that fate, however delayed and however hidden, had finally brought them together exactly when they needed each other most,